Hey guys, good morning. Today, instead of an AP Cut video, I had posted some biology videos, but I'm trying to study for my biology EOC, and so today's topic is going to be evolution. So, shout out to all my subscribers, and if you are not subscribed, please join them. They're very happy to be my subscribers. So yeah, let's get into the video. So overall, evolution is just the change in allele frequencies in a population over time. And so it's just how species change, how they adapt. Think humans that went from apes to how we are now, just how they adapt over time. It just like the mass scale of how we adapt over time. The main way species change is through natural selection, which is how they get traits that help them help them better adapt to their environment, so they can survive and thrive and reproduce better. And so this happens mainly through selective pressures and on accident through genetic. Words are hard today apparently. Through genetic mutations. So, for example, one of the examples we use in biology is the rock pocket mice, which is the finches, Charles Darwin's finches, if you will. But the rock pocket mice, say there's a desert and there's a bunch of white mice or like tan mice living in the desert, and they all are camouflaged, and so they won't get hunted down by predators. But then there was a volcanic eruption that made the whole ground and the whole environment black because like magma dried and it made everything black. So all those white mice get like hunted and eaten by like the birds and stuff, but like the select few black mice that happen to be existing because of genetic mutation beforehand now are the majority, because all of the white mice that were the majority before are getting preyed upon and eaten. So then the small population of black mice get to thrive and survive and create more of black mice. And so over time, environmental changes and things like food scarcity or certain just things that happen affect natural selection, which is usually caused an accident or like through just genetic mutation that then lead to adaptations, so animals can better live in their environment. Or another reason how evolution happens is through genetic flow. So think monarch butterflies who migrate, or birds that migrate from place to place, and then just say the species goes to like Mexico for the winter and then doesn't go back to their homeland, they just stay there, and then they become part of the population there, and they interbreed with other birds, so that creates more of a genetic diversity, leading to a different species, which is called speciation. So that was my segue into speciation. So speciation is when one population splits into one species splits into two separate species, and that doesn't mean that the original species is like a fish, and then one becomes a bird and one becomes a reptile. It's, say you have like a salmon fish, and it splits. So you have like two different species that are similar but cannot reproduce and produce fertile offspring. So it's like they are not drastically different species, but they're different enough to where they can't interbreed anymore because they are separate species, and their offspring either won't survive or they won't be fertile. Think the mule, which is a cross between a donkey and a horse. Like, they're not that different, but when they like breed and create a mule can't reproduce because it's not an actual species. It's a mix of two separate species. So yeah, and the horse and the donkey would have come from the same species before they split off. That's speciation for you. And speciation is almost always caused by some kind of isolation, like preventing half of one species and half the other to not be able to intermingle anymore. I'm going to elaborate more on that. There are different kinds of isolation that are prezygotic, meaning if this isolation occurs, the two different species won't even be able to create an offspring because their gametes just won't like do it because they're just too different. First one is geographical isolation, which is one of is what isolation means when it first comes to mind. So say you have a fish in a pond and then a dam gets put up, like a human-made dam gets put up. So half of the fish species and the other half are no longer coming in contact. And so based on different different environments in each of the halves of the lake and different food resources, they, after hundreds of years or tens of years, they become different species. So they're very, very similar, but they're different enough to where they're not the same species anymore. So they can't reproduce together if they came in contact somehow again. So both of the species will just evolve in different ways on their own until they're so different that they're no longer the same species. Oh, sorry. Okay. Next one is temporal isolation, which is where the same species, so say peacocks of like the same species, different populations of them in different areas reproduce at different times. So like the peacocks in the north tend to reproduce during the springtime, but the peacocks in the south want to reproduce in the fall. So that reproduction time period never overlaps. Therefore, they never interconnect, therefore becoming different species slightly because they both evolve on their own without interacting with each other because they just slightly miss each other's time period of being able to interbreed. So after a period of time, they just become separate species because they're not coming in contact with each other. Next one is behavioral isolation, which is just where during the mating period, the same species, still talking about peacocks, we'll say, different populations or just different populations will have different mating rituals which either turn off or turn on the woman or the female peacock. And so if different populations have different mating calls, like fluffing their feathers or like singing or something, and they have different rituals per population, the peacocks in the north might like to sing to their ladies to get them to breed with them, but the peacocks in the south might fluff their feathers or do a little dance or fight males. And so when these two populations come in contact, the females don't recognize that what the males are doing is a mating call. So they're like, what the hell is he doing? What is he who brought this guy in? Needs some help or something? So they don't recognize each other as mates and therefore won't interbreed, making them two different species because they evolve differently because they just don't come in contact. Okay, the next one is mechanical isolation, which is kind of confusing because the way it is worded everywhere makes it sound like there's a physical barrier between the two populations, but it's not the same as geographic isolation because mechanical isolation is their genitalia won't work. They won't be able to physically reproduce because of size difference. Say the peacocks, go back to these damn peacocks, sorry. The peacocks in the north happen to be 2 feet tall, averaging 50 pounds. And the ones in the south, based off of food resources and their location and all that kind of thing, they happen to be 30 pounds smaller and 6 inches smaller. So they're significantly smaller than the other population, meaning their genitalia is also going to be smaller, and it just physically won't work, if you will. So it's if they physically just can't reproduce because of how they've slightly become different. And so since they can't reproduce, there's no point in them interacting, so they become completely different species. Speciation. The last one is gametic, as in gamete, which is just where the sperm and the egg of the different populations aren't chemically compatible. 1 second. So basically, if the populations do try to reproduce, the egg and the sperm just won't fuse, basically. So this is still prezygotic because the fertilization of the animal, of the fetus, will just not occur because the sperm and the egg, if they get that far as to being able to reproduce, they won't be able to create an offspring because their sex cells won't do it together, I guess. So the second type of isolation is postzygotic, meaning that fertilization will occur, but either the offspring will not survive birth, won't survive very long in the womb, or won't be, will live a life, but won't be fertile, won't be able to produce offspring. So they're not an actual species, they're just a genetic accident, or a genetic cheat code or something, however you want to see it. They're not actual species. So there's 3 types. That's like the main idea. That's kind of its own thing. But there are 3 subcategories, which is hybrid inviability, hybrid sterility, and hybrid breakdown. So hybrid inviability means that fertilization in the egg between these 2 different species can occur because they're similar enough to where it can occur, but the offspring will be very weak. It won't be fertile no matter what, and it'll most likely die at a young age because it'll just be kind of weak and unable to survive that well on its own because it will have these weird genetic mutations and will look kind of deformed and stuff like that. This is hybrid sterility, which is where the offspring is created from these 2 separate species, but they're close enough. Think the mule, where it can survive, be healthy, live a healthy life. It just won't be able to reproduce because it's sterile, because it's not a real species. The third is very rarely seen, and I don't know if it's very talked about in biology. I don't know if it's going to be on any of the tests, but it's hybrid breakdown, which is where the first generation of these hybrid species between the 2 different species are fine and are fertile, but that next generation after it are weak or sterile and will look like how the hybrid inviability looks, but in the second generation, if that makes sense. Okay, for your EOC, if it comes down to it, all you need to know is that isolation leads to no gene flow or no interbreeding or no intermingling between the 2 species, which leads to new populations diverging, which leads to the species not being able to interbreed, like I just mentioned. And then all that equals a new species, because if you can't reproduce with different species, they'll just do their own thing. Think about my peacock example that I use over and over again. So this is evolution. I didn't know that much about it, and now I'm like kind of know more about it because I wasn't. Yeah. So let me know if this helped in the comments. I'm gonna hopefully ask Miss Towner to play this video in class. Good luck in the EOC, guys.